Rex felt a crushing sense of existential dread when he realized the monster of a newbie Cody had just given him was now immortalized on video. The rest of Cody's batch would surely see the footage before sundown. Comms blackout be damned. "Oh no, don't stop on my account," Skywalker called through his laughter, holo recorder still running. Rex rolled his eyes and shoved Cody off of him, brushing at the dust on his armor with one hand. He glared at his brother, the obnoxiously self-satisfied look on Cody's face causing his teeth to grind. "Oh no, I'm good, General." "Indeed." Obi-Wan shook his head, huffing a short laugh. "If you're finished?" "We're done, sir." Cody was far too smug as he bent down to pick up his fallen helmet. He tucked it under his arm smoothly, face arranged into his perfect commander expression, like he wasn't just roughhousing with Rex like a cadet. Rex gave him a potent stink eye, but Cody remained entirely unaffected. They walked back to the command center in companionable silence after that, lost in their own thoughts. Rom and Numbers met them on the way, taking the tactical droid head off General Skywalker's hands and squirreling it away to work their magic on it. They were the best slices in the 5 worst, likely in the whole Third Systems army, and if they couldn't crack it, Rex didn't hold out much hope for success. General Skywalker followed along with the dynamic slicing duo, an interested gleam in his blue eyes. Rex, Cody, and Obi-Wan continued on to the infirmary, and when they arrived, it was to the usual post-battle organized chaos. Helix and Kix were directing traffic, working in tandem like a well-oiled machine. The 2-1-12th and the 5-1-1st worked together enough that the two medics had forged a steadfast alliance, easily shifting duties as needed and shoring each other up. They each had a few junior medics under their command, running about the room, plus Kaz, who was wielding a medical scanner and attentively reporting the results to Helix. "Yeah, just put him on that bed over there." Kix called out instructions, pointing at different troopers and helping relieve them of their burdens. "I need a Bacta infusion over here," Helix shouted out, leaning over the patient that Kaz had been scanning. One was suddenly thrust under his nose by a nearby medical droid, and Helix wasted no time in administering it to his patient. He patted the cadet on the shoulder. "Good eye on that one, kid." Kaz glowed a little at the praise. "Thanks." His brow furrowed suddenly, and he looked over towards the doorway, then grinned, spotting Obi-Wan, Cody, and Rex. "Master Obi-Wan, Cody, you're back." Hastily, he set his scanner down and hurried over to them. In the time since they had left this morning, Kaz had donned his complete armor, minus the helmet, and freshened up. His hair was clean and shiny, and so was his armor. He crashed headlong into Cody, causing the other man to let out a pained oomph and wrapped his arms around him in a hug. Cody ruffled the cadet's hair as Kaz pulled away and beamed up at the three of them. "Hello, Padawan," Obi-Wan greeted with a smile. It was his turn to let out a grunt when Kaz darted to him and gave him the same treatment as Cody. "Glad to see you, too." "Did you stay out of trouble?" Cody asked as Kaz released Obi-Wan. He guided them all further into the sickbay, heading towards Helix to get the preliminary casualty report. "He did great, Commander," Helix reported, waving them over to the little alcove he and Kix used as an office. Even did some of his Jedi flash modules, too. "Ah, perfect. We'll go over those later." Obi-Wan gave his apprentice an approving nod. "Here, Master, watch," Kaz said eagerly. He reached out, closing his eyes and focusing on a collection of empty syringes. Slowly, they began to float, then to spin around each other in a complicated little dance. They twined easily in the air, then lined up end to end, like little spacecraft coming in for a landing, and looped gently about Helix's head before settling in neat little rows back in the instrument tray they came from. Obi-Wan's eyebrows were at his hairline as Kaz opened his eyes and looked up at him expectantly. Really, Obi-Wan reflected, that was an impressive bit of precision work. Well done, Kaz. Kaz grinned. It took me all day to figure it out. I'm pretty proud of it. You should be, Obi-Wan agreed. Well, I'm definitely impressed. Rex agreed with a smile. Just wait, you'll be throwing droids around in no time. Yeah, I think maybe a lightsaber first and then we'll see about blasting clankers. Cody hedged, a hint of worry lingering at the edges of his eyes. That would probably be best, yes. Obi-Wan crossed his arms and nodded, sharing a quick grin with Cody. His expression smoothed out, and he turned a serious eye onto Helix. What's the report, Captain? Looking good, General. Helix nodded, slipping into a comfortable at ease, feet shoulder width and hands at the small of his back as he gave his report. Only 1 dead, 10 wounded, 2 of which will have to stay here overnight. It could have been much worse, sir. Who did the casualty belong to? Obi-Wan asked, face creased in concern. I don't remember one of ours going down.
He was one of mine, sir. Shot down as we cabled over from our tower to yours.
Captain Rex interjected, already mentally writing his own report. He grimaced. How many of those wounded are 501'd? Just 2 mild grazes with a blaster bolt on both, Captain. No other serious injuries for Torrent Company today. I take it the 2 staying the night belong to Ghost then. Cody's jaw clenched briefly, but he forced himself to relax. Yes, sir, but they'll be up and ready to go by morning. I'm keeping one for a concussion. The other took a hit to the abdomen that I want to monitor. Everyone else came in with minor bumps and bruises. Cody nodded, the tension in his shoulders fading, and he breathed a little easier. Not bad. It could have been much worse after that botched ambush. Much, much worse. He was keenly aware that they'd gotten off easy and knew if they didn't implode the leak, the next time they would not be so lucky. Good work, Captain.
Thank you, sir.
Helix relaxed, dropping his military stance and crossing his arms over his chest, leaning in a little closer to Cody. Cody, Kix was telling me, the ambush went south, that the enemy knew your position. Is that true? Cody blew out a long sigh and scrubbed a hand over his face. Unfortunately, yes. Ram, Numbers and General Skywalker are working on decrypting a tactical droid head that Rex managed to snag on our way out to see if we can figure out how they had our intel. Helix let out a low whistle, looking over his shoulder at the infirmary again, shook his head. And these were the only injuries? Shab, Cody, you got lucky. Yes, we did. Obi-Wan agreed solemnly. He and Cody shared a significant look. Wait, so we have a spy? Kaz asked, alarmed. His eyes were wide as they looked from Obi-Wan to Cody. We don't know that just yet, Obi-Wan was quick to reassure. It could be something as simple as our communications were sliced into. We'll know more as soon as Anakin, Ram, and Numbers are done. General, we should probably head to the hot wash, Cody said, glancing at his comlink and reading a few messages. Admiral Yularen is pinging us for an update. He's impatient today. Obi-Wan mumbled to himself. He shrugged, expression resigned, and turned to leave. Thank you for the report, Helix, and for keeping an eye on Kaz. I'm sure we'll run into each other later. Anytime, sir. Let me know what you find out. We will. With that, they turned to leave, Obi-Wan leading the way. Kaz conferred briefly with Helix, making sure the medic did not need him, before scampering after Obi-Wan, Cody, and Rex. He knew his position as General Kenobi's Padawan gave him more access to information than a cadet was reasonably expected to have, and was intent on taking advantage of it. He had the Force, after all, And maybe he could figure out a way to use it to catch the spy and stop them from ruining all their plans. He had no idea how to do this exactly, but that hadn't stopped him yet. Even though he'd only been learning to be a Jedi for a 10-day, he'd already figured out that the Force would provide, so long as he trusted in it and asked nicely. The asking nicely part of it seemed to be the real trick to getting anything done. The Force did not like it when he demanded things of it, not at all. All too soon, they were in the command center. Kaz stuck close to his master's side, doing his best to be unobtrusive so he could stay there and observe. Master Obi. Wan seemed to expect him to be at his side, though, giving him enough space to squeeze easily between him and Cody, and placing a guiding hand between his shoulders. Clearly, it was expected of him as a Padawan to go nearly everywhere his master went and experience everything his master experienced, except, of course, fighting droids. That he was not allowed to do, and it still stuck in his craw 8 days later. Maybe, if he were to prove himself, they'd let him back out on the battlefield. He was a trooper, too, just like all his brothers. It was practically his purpose in life to blast those nasty clankers. He just needed to convince his master and Cody of that fact, too. Mind spinning over ways he could get Master Obi-Wan and Commander Cody to trust his combat abilities. Kaz watched as the holocall connected and the rather harried form of Admiral Yularen appeared. Ah, General Kenobi. There you are. I heard your ambush went poorly. That's one way of putting it, yes, Obi. Wan sighed, crossing his arms and letting the fingers of his left hand stroke absently over his beard. Our position in the South Tower was compromised, and we were the ones ambushed by droids. The reinforcements to the blockade have arrived. I'm afraid, until we whittle down their numbers, your options for air support are severely limited, General. Then we shall just have to make do. Do you have a plan to discover the source of the leak? Anakin and his best slicers are working on it as we speak, Obi-Wan replied, perking up at the thought of a plan. As soon as they bring us any definitive information, we will act swiftly. Keep me apprised as best you can, sir, Admiral Yularen said, the concern on his features easily seen even through the blue of his hologram. We will do our best to keep them busy up here. Thank you, Admiral. I hope to have this situation resolved soon. Of course, Resolute out. After the holocall with the Resolute, they launched into the after-action report, pulling in the other squad leaders that had been on site, as well as General Skywalker, who had left the decryption of the tactical droid in the capable hands of Ram and Numbers. The hot wash took nearly an hour, and by the time it was over, they were all sick and tired of rehashing events leading up to the failed ambush. Calling an end to the meeting, General Kenobi dismissed everyone back to their various duties and headed out to the mess with Anakin, Cody, Rex, and Kaz. Before long, they arrived at the mess hall and stepped inside, joining the queue for food. It was more of the mass-producible, flash-frozen, dehydrated stuff the Garrett tended to issue, but it was still food, even if hot water needed to be added to it for it to be edible. Tray-filled, Obi-Wan stepped away from the chow line to survey the room and spotted Waxer, Helix, and Boyle frantically waving them down. Obi-Wan made a beeline for them, the others following in his wake. Usually, Rex and Anakin would sit over with the 50 Worst, but they were all out in the weapons depot resupplying after the ambush, having already eaten. As Obi-Wan slid into his seat, Helix immediately started interrogating Cody. Commander, any news on the leak? Nothing yet. Still waiting on the slicers to finish up, Cody said with a small sigh, taking a bite of his food. Hopefully we'll know something soon. Yeah, I don't like this waiting around, Helix said darkly. It feels like there's someone standing around looking over my shoulder. You know, that's called paranoia. You should probably get that checked, Cody said with a cheeky smirk around his glass of water. It's not paranoia if someone is actually out to get you. Anakin pointed out logically, fork hanging from loose fingers. Aha, see? There you go. I am completely justified, Commander. Helix sat back and crossed his arms over his chest, smug look on his face. Yeah, I don't think that's how it works. Cody's expression was sly. Who would want to spy on you anyways? I'll have you know I am a deep and interesting individual. Helix shot right back, leaning forward and resting his elbows on the table. He smirked. The gleam in his eye was frankly frightening. Keep going, Commander, and you'll find out up close. You're due for a checkup soon, right? All right, Cody exclaimed, dropping his fork and holding up both hands in surrender. I won't sass you anymore, Helix. At least your self-preservation instincts are still intact. Rex said with a laugh, poking an elbow into Cody's ribs. Never piss off the healer. Anakin nodded his head sagely. He pointed his fork down the table at Obi-Wan. I learned that one from watching you, Master. Obi-Wan sighed mightily, gazing up at the ceiling as if praying for strength. Why, thank you, Anakin. You're welcome, Obi-Wan, Anakin replied cheekily, shoveling in his rations like they were actual food and not sawdust masquerading as a meal. It was your example of what not to do that guided me. He glared at Anakin through the spaces between his fingers. Of course, I am delighted to hear that you learned so effectively from my mistakes. At least you know he learned something, sir. Rex said with a mischievous smirk. Hey. Yes, I had despaired of the thought that I was unable to pass along any knowledge at all, Captain. Thank you for giving me this small speck of hope. Rex's sudden bout of laughter caused him to nearly snort his drink out his nose, which set the entire table howling. They ribbed the captain good-naturedly as he attempted to mop the muja juice off of his chest plate and the small strip of his blacks by his collarbone while coughing on the juice. If he didn't get it all, he knew it would turn into a sticky, tacky mess. If you were nicer to me, I would help you. Anakin gave an imperious sniff. But you weren't, so I'm letting you suffer. Cody rolled his eyes, snatched up his napkin, wetting it in water from his own cup, and then passed it to Rex. Here, Rex, before you pick up every speck of dirt and dust in this place and take it back into space with you. Sufficiently mopped, he tossed the napkin into a nearby bin and leveled his teasing look onto Cody. Good to know you're still a mother toka, Cody. Mock me and I won't save you next time, Rex. Cody thrust a warning finger in Rex's general direction. You will too, and you know it. Cody ground his teeth together but otherwise didn't comment. He knew better than to engage Rex when he got like this. It always devolved into a wrestling match because no matter how much Cody tried, he couldn't win their verbal sparring. But he most certainly could pin Rex to the ground and keep him there for the rest of his natural life. However, the mess hall was no place for aggressive brotherly interaction. So Cody continued to doggedly eat his dinner in silence. Rex leaned back in his seat and outright cackled. Giving up already, Cody? You're no fun. On the contrary, Obi-Wan interjected brightly, mischief written across his face. Of the two of you, I think Cody is the most fun. Oh, General, I'm hurt. Rex leaned back from the table, placing a hand theatrically over his heart. You don't get a vote, Master, Anakin said with a conspiratorial grin in Rex's direction. Your idea of fun is doing research and meditating. No wonder you think Cody is more fun. He's just like you. Kaz gave Anakin a highly skeptical look. Are you sure about that? I second this question, Boyle said, raising his fork like he was bidding at an auction. What do you do in your spare time, Commander? This question came from Waxer as he rested his elbows on the table and leaned forward. Cody smirked and took a sip of his water. Wouldn't you like to know, Lieutenant? Are you implying it's not reading Republic strategy guides and regulation manuals? Anakin shifted forward to give Cody his best innocent expression. Why would I need to read those when I memorized them years ago? Cody's smirk widened, and his amber gold eyes seemed to glow with devious intent. He actually did. I'll vouch for it. Helix said with a dismayed shake of his head. But of course, I would expect nothing less of my commander. Obi-Wan said in mock seriousness. He smiled charmingly at Cody, and though his next words were said in a teasing tone, there was a genuine light in his eyes. He gave Cody a nudge through their bond. Always insisting upon excellence, aren't you, Cody? Cody's eyes flicked up to meet Obi-Wan's, and he smirked like the tuca that got the cream, eyes glittering with mischief, picking up on the hints Obi-Wan had given him. He abruptly sat up straight, head high, feet forward, hands at his sides and eyes ahead, and called out in a booming voice, "Loyalty, service, excellence. Fight hard, fight true. 2, 1, 2, Oya." All the 212th Battalion troopers in hearing range of Cody's chant shouted their answer, vambraces clacking once on their chest plates. Even Kaz participated, having learned it from Helix, Waxer, and Boyle. Afterward, they all went back to their meals like nothing at all had happened, leaving some stunned troopers from Senator Organa's battalion in their wake. Anakin gave Obi-Wan a wide-eyed look, clearly not having witnessed anything like this before. When Obi-Wan just gave him a smug grin, he turned his confused eyes onto Rex, pleading. The captain rolled his eyes, crossed his arms over his chest, and gave an extremely pleased with himself. Cody, an exasperated glare. "Oh, get out of here with that, Cody. What's the matter, Rex?" Cody's smirk turned to a sharp grin, eyes alight with vindictive glee. "Jealous? The 5-0 worst doesn't have a morale chant yet. We don't need it because we aren't infants." Rex shot back quickly, turning his nose up at Cody. "Yeah, you're jealous." This came from a heavily smirking Kaz. Rex just scoffed, shaking his head in dismay. "You're all defective." "Rex, why don't we have a chant?" Anakin asked, poking his captain in the arm. "How come you didn't tell me this was a thing?" That set off the table into a storm of laughter, which made Rex's scowl deepen. He turned that plasma cutter hot glare onto Anakin. "Sir, it's not a thing." "It looked like a thing to me. You'd better get on it, Captain. He sounds serious." Cody took a sip of his water, looking like butter wouldn't melt in his mouth. "Yes, Anakin doesn't like to be left out, Captain Rex," Obi-Wan said, his face a mirror image of Cody's. He shared a conspiratorial wink with Cody that Rex couldn't see. Rex spluttered, flustered by both generals looking at him expectantly, one pleading and one auspiciously. His eyes darted to Waxer, Helix, and Boyle, all three of whom looked far too pleased with his suffering. The 5-0 worst and the 212th had a minor friendly rivalry that mirrored their generals' relationship with one another, and it tended to manifest itself into situations like this. Rex sighed, letting his face drop into his hands in defeated despair. "All right, sir. I'll set Jesse and Hardcase on it. I'm sure they'll come up with something." Rex capitulated, looking like it was causing him physical pain to do so. "Thanks, Rex," Anakin said brightly, clapping his captain on the shoulder. Rex looked like he'd swallowed something foul, crisp, but he'd hated those damn chants in training on Kamino. He was never any good at them. "No problem, sir." Waxer and Boyle crowed in delight, giving each other a loud high five while Helix rolled his eyes at their antics, choosing to focus on eating his dinner instead. Anakin beamed at Rex, satisfied enough with this outcome to focus his attention entirely on his food. Kaz just smiled at them all, relaxed and happy to be included, his Force presence plucky and content. Obi-Wan and Cody shared a triumphant look, and Cody reveled in the fact that he'd gotten one over on Rex. The 212th had been losing the game up until that moment, and he was thankful to his general for giving him an opportunity to even the score. He couldn't beat Rex at his own dance alone, but no one could verbally outspar. General Kenobi. Rex hadn't stood a chance. Cody nudged his general's elbow to get his attention and then spoke quietly. "Thanks, sir." "Of course," Obi-Wan murmured back, lips barely moving, sharing an infinitesimal smirk with Cody. They lapsed into a comfortable silence after that, companionably finishing up their meals, and then splitting off to go their separate ways. Cody and Rex paired off to check on Ram and Numbers, Anakin to go do something he'd mumbled about unintelligibly, Helix to get to the infirmary and check on Kix and his patients, Waxer and Boyle to check on their squads before lights out, and Obi-Wan and Kaz headed towards the roof to meditate. When Cody and Rex arrived at Ram and Numbers' hideout, they were pleasantly surprised to discover that the two slicers had cracked the encryption around the tactical droid's memory bank. They handed it over to their commanding officer, and Rex promised them extra downtime for their rousing success. Deciding that the holotable in the command center had the best odds for being able to interface with the stolen droid, Cody and Rex headed back that way, sending messages to both of their generals as they did so. By the time they'd once again arrived in the operations hub, the sun had started its slow descent in the sky. Rex dropped the droid head in the center of the holotable and started rooting around in the storage underneath it for the cables they would need. Fumbling around, arm inside the storage up to his shoulder and his face pressed against the casing, Rex felt his fingers close on the cables and let out a triumphant noise. "There it is. Who'd jam this all the way under here anyway?" Rex grumbled, standing and shaking out the cables. Cody came up to him and grabbed one, walking to the other side of the table. "No idea. Probably one of the Senator's Natborns." "Probably," Rex muttered distractedly as he fiddled with connecting the cables to the droid's head. After a moment, they snicked into place, and the droid's eyes lit up, as did the holotable. Predictably, it did not stay that way for long. Rex cursed, quickly manipulating the controls on the holotable to get the signal back. Cody leaned over next to him, watching. Of the two of them, Rex was the better slicer, but neither of them were anything to write home about. The lights in the droid's eyes guttered, and a blue hologram of the South Tower flickered to life above it on the table. "Oh, that's it, Rexica. Don't twitch." Rex rolled his eyes and huffed a laugh, one hand at an awkward angle on the connector, attached to the droid, and the other gently turning a dial on the table. Hadn't planned on it, Vod. Slowly, like he was defusing a bomb, Rex let go of the dial and the connector cable to the droid and stepped back, reaching for the initiator switch that would run the translator program. Cody backed up with him, hand clenching down slightly on Rex's trapezius muscle in his anxiety. They shared a look and shrugged in unison. "Here goes nothing," Rex muttered and pressed the button. The sickly glow of the droid's eyes brightened to full strength, and it began to speak, making garbled, unintelligible noises in binary interspersed with electronic screeches that sounded vaguely like words in Galactic Basic. Cody and Rex shared another confused glance. "Is it supposed to be doing that?" Rex asked, giving Cody a helpless look. "I have no idea," Cody said with an equally confused shake of his head. He flailed his free hand in the air, the other still hanging on to Rex. Suddenly, the strange beeping and screeching noises stopped, and the droid started to speak clearly. "The Republic Army is in the North and South Towers, level 46. "What? How does it know? Blast!" Rex yelped, jumping away from Cody as sparks flew from the connectors and smoke started to hiss from the droid, along with the sour smell of burning circuits. After a last pathetic squeal, the lights in its eyes died completely, At that moment, General Skywalker, Obi-Wan, and Kaz strode into the room. Well, at least we're not the only ones having a bad day, Anakin said, coming to a stop next to Rex. General Kenobi, General Skywalker. Cody greeted with nods for each of them, ever the consummate soldier. He smiled over at Kaz. Kid. Man, it stinks in here, Kaz exclaimed, waving a hand in front of his face and giving the smoking droid head a dirty look. I have always disliked the smell of burning circuits. Obi-Wan agreed, his nose wrinkling up in displeasure. He turned to Cody. What did you manage to find out, Commander? Just what we already knew, General, Cody said with a sigh, gesturing a hand at the destroyed droid. They knew we were in the towers and what level we'd set up on. Someone had clearly given them the specifics of our plan. Well, that's not good, Obi-Wan mumbled, arms crossing and hand coming up to smooth at his beard. That explains why we got ambushed, but not how, Anakin said, walking around the table to peer at the droid, his face screwed up in a grimace. Yeah, that thing is fried. We won't be getting any more intel out of it. We shall have to deduce the answer. The old-fashioned way, then. Obi-Wan answered, hand gesturing lightly in the air. All right, so, event. We were ambushed. Anakin began, starting to pace around the palatable cause. Our location was made known to the enemy, Obi-Wan continued, eyes going distant in thought. How? Communications were hacked? Rex suggested, palms raising in a slight shrug. Possible, but unlikely, Obi-Wan responded, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, making his saber jostle slightly on his belt. We planned this largely in person. Comms chatter was limited. Other suggestions? Computer terminals were sliced into, Cody offered, his own arms crossing over his chest. Harder to do, but it would have given them the information they needed, Anakin said with a nod. He frowned, lips twisting in discontent. Still, something's missing. The original thought? Kaz said hesitantly, gulping loudly when every eye in the room turned to him. He scrubbed a hand through his hair and gestured with the other. By that I mean, we have a spy? Obi-Wan and Anakin shared a look, then in tandem closed their eyes and reached out to the Force. They conferred with each other for a moment, pushing out and back, querying the Force. As one, they opened their eyes, and Obi-Wan spoke. That seems the most likely. But who would want to betray our troops to the Seppies? Cody shifted, thumbs resting lightly in his utility belt, a vaguely incredulous expression on his face and in his voice. That is the question, Obi-Wan answered, eyebrows raising towards his hairline. What little meditation Kaz and I managed to accomplish after dinner gave me the impression that I ought to head behind enemy lines. We know the location of their base. Perhaps we should pay them a visit and determine the name of their informant at the source? Anakin said, a curiously approving expression on his young features. I agree. Yes, that. And I sensed a disturbance in the Force. A disturbance? Kaz's head whipped around to look at his master. What does that mean? It can mean a lot of things, Obi-Wan began contemplatively. But in this instance, I believe it means we might have some rather unpleasant company. And by that, he means a Darksider. Anakin said grimly, lips set in a thin line and brows drawn. Well, that's just great. Cody groaned, rubbing a hand over his face, as if this campaign needed anything else. You mean a Darth Jedi? Kaz demanded, young voice squeaking high in alarm. He cast a panicked look between Anakin and Obi-Wan. What are we gonna do? Anakin grinned brightly at him. Easy. Obi-Wan and I are going to go pay them a visit while Commander Cody and Captain Rex try and find the source of the leak here. You are going to stay somewhere safe and out of trouble. Right, Master? Yes, precisely. Obi-Wan nodded, dropping his arms and placing his hands on Kaz's shoulders. I want you to stay in the barracks until Cody and Rex say it's safe, Padawan. But I can help them. I'm sure you can, but if this person was callous enough with other people's lives to betray 3 battalions of your brothers, then they are callous enough to hurt you. Obi-Wan told him. He gave the cadet a reassuring smile. So I want you to stay in the barracks where it's safe. Cody will calm you when he knows more, all right? Kaz's jaw was set in a stubborn line, but he didn't argue. Yes, Master Obi-Wan. General, are you sure you don't want one of us to go with you? Cody said carefully, knowing he was going to be refused but asking anyway. No, Commander. I think it would be best if you and Captain Rex worked on this here. Anakin and I can handle the infiltration. Of course, sir. You can count on us, General Kenobi. Just one more precaution, Obi. Wan sighed deeply and gave them all a solemn look. Tell no one of our mission. We don't know who to trust other than the people in this room, and until that changes, we must proceed with all due caution. Cody's spine snapped straight, almost like he was coming to attention, and he nodded. Yes, sir. Obi-Wan gave Kaz a significant glance. That means you too, Padawan. Not a word to anyone. Yes, Master Obi-Wan. I'll go to the barracks and meditate. That way no one will try to ask me questions. Kaz suggested, smiling slightly. He still looked unhappy with the whole situation, but had not decided to fight them on it yet. Good idea, kid. Cody nodded to him. Let us know if you find anything, Rex. General Skywalker said as he, Obi-Wan, and Kaz left the room. Will do, sir. Rex called to his retreating back. Kaz paused in the doorway, looking back at Cody. Are you sure you don't want my help, Cody? Maybe I could use the Force to find the spy. Cody laughed and shook his head. No, kid, the General's right. Best for you to just stay out of it. Go enjoy your meditation. I'll come get you later. Kaz's shoulders drooped, but he nodded. Okay.
See you later, Rex. You too, Kaz.
With that, the cadet slipped from the room, his light footfalls echoing gently down the hallway. Cody and Rex stood, lost in thought in the silence before Rex made to follow Kaz out of the door, leaving a pensive Cody near the holotable, a distracted look on his face. When his eyes tracked Rex going to the door, they narrowed, and he suddenly darted forward, startling Rex, and snatched up a blinking communicator. He brandished it at Rex. This was on the whole time. Someone was listening to everything we said. What? Rex demanded sharply. He snarled. No way they're getting away with that. Dashing out into the hallway, Cody hot on his heels, Rex spotted a flash of Trooper White disappear around the corner. Hey, stop! Rex was off like a shot, Cody pounding after him. Who was it? Did you see them? Cody asked, breath short, as they hauled ass down the hallway. No idea. Rex growled back. I'll follow him. You take the west corridor, Cody ordered swiftly as they came up to an intersection. Copy that. Cody slid left, Rex dodging right and followed down the hallway with a single-minded determination. He could feel the Force like it was nipping at his heels, sharp and uncomfortable, dogging his every step eagerly. Gritting his teeth, Cody yanked on the sensation, wrestling it down into something manageable, forcing it outward and feeling along the walls and through the air, trying to track with his feelings what Rex had seen with his eyes. He didn't think he had much success. Abruptly, the hall turned right, and Cody barreled around the corner only to skid to a hurried stop, hands up in the classic "don't shoot me" gesture in the face of Rex's DC-17. They shared a quick shrug and rueful look before Rex holstered his weapon and turned towards the door he was standing in front of. "Think he went into the mess hall," Rex said. Cody nodded grimly. "Best check it out then." The commander reached out and palmed open the door, he and Rex stepping over the threshold together. Pausing just inside the door, they both quickly surveyed the room. Cody felt his guts twist uncomfortably when the foreboding sensation from earlier in the day returned with a vengeance. "We've got a big problem," he muttered darkly. "Yeah," Rex agreed, voice just as heavy. "The only people in here are Vode."
"So, it's one of us then,"
Cody breathed out, resisting the urge to rub at his chest as the bad feeling migrated up from his intestines. "Yeah, but which one?" Rex growled out, frustration starting to peak. Cody's jaw clenched, the muscles in it jumping and causing his scar to twitch. No way to tell. Only thing we can do now is wait for his next move. "Delightful," Rex said snarkily. He turned and gave Cody an appraising look. "You were able to sense Kaz on Kamino. Think you could flush this guy out with the Force?" Cody shook his head, crossing his arms, expression annoyed. "No. The only thing I feel right now is the absolute sense that this is about to go tits up. I can hardly think around it." "Well, that's so useful," Rex said grouchily. He scoffed and turned, leaving the mess hall, Cody following close behind him. The mess hall door hissed shut and left them alone in the hallway. Cody was the one to break the silence. "Best keep this revelation to ourselves." "Not that we weren't already," Rex agreed mildly as they set off towards the command center again. He slammed a fist into his palm with the crack of plastoid. "Hard chuck. We almost had this shabuyer. We'll get him." Cody's tone brooked no argument. "Better let General Kenobi and General Skywalker know, though. Yeah, they're not gonna like this." No. It was still same 10 beds, all lined up in neat rows, sheets done up so well you could bounce a credit chit off them, but only one of them was occupied. Waxer reclined in his own bunk, back resting on the wall, and datapad balanced on his bent knees. Closing his eyes, Kaz reached for the Force and tried to slip himself into his meditation. It was a struggle, his mind refusing to clear and his thoughts centered entirely upon the spy. Giving up on a regular meditation, Kaz let his mind wander down the path of the spy, trying to tease out anything he could from the information he had. The Force danced and whispered around him, and Kaz reached out, trying to grasp it between his mental fingers. It slipped from his hold until he realized he was pressing too tightly, demanding rather than asking. So he sat, taking a deep breath, opening his mind, and waited for the Force to place the answer into it. Thoughts, images, impressions, feelings, blurry scenes of his day paraded before his mind's eye. Time was lost. The sensation of the bed under his thighs faded away, the now comforting weight of his armor lost in the river of the Force's power. Kaz felt like he was adrift at sea on Kamino, nothing around him but wind, water, and waves. Just as fear started to creep in, a face flashed before him. Confusion overtook the anxious feelings of being lost, and Kaz wondered at that face, clear as day in his mind. It was familiar, like every bod's face was to him. But unlike Natborn's, Kaz had been trained from a young age to see the subtle differences life experience wrought on their expressions. This one had a high and tight military cut, an almost severe cast to his features, and a light in his eyes that set Kaz's teeth on edge. He'd met this man. He knew it with the certainty that he knew the sky was blue. Slowly, he became aware of the Force nudging him, urging him to rise from his meditation. So he did. It felt like drowning in reverse, diving up from the bottom of the ocean and not having enough air in the tank. Kaz jerked back into himself with a gasp, casting wide eyes around the bunk room. It was empty. Waxer must have left at some point. Kaz looked down, checking the chrono on his vambrace, and felt his eyebrows jump. He'd been at this for a little over an hour. Poking, the Force prodded at him more insistently, and without even questioning it, Kaz leapt from his bed and darted to the door. Stepping out into the hallway, he glanced down, checking to make sure his DC-17 was strapped in tight, then took off down the corridor. He just kept walking, taking turn after turn on some unclear instinct until he realized it was leading him to the south gate that led to the weapons depot and loading zone. Alarm suddenly slammed through him, making his pulse race and his legs pump faster as his power walk turned into an all-out sprint. Force ringing in his ears, Kaz took a sudden left, moving towards the route to the command center from the south exit, just as a deafening series of explosions split the night. Kaboom! Durasteel walls rattling and ground shaking. Kaz was knocked off his feet from the shockwave, and he hit the deck, only to scramble back to his feet and continue his mad dash down the hall. So intent was he on the feeling in his head that he failed to notice the other trooper in full armor until they collided headlong in a splitting crack of plastoid. Ow! Griffin hell, Kaz yelped, limbs flailing as he climbed to his feet.
Watch where you're going, cadet.
The older clone snapped, using his greater height to glare down at Kaz for a beat before whirling around and bolting down the hallway. Kaz's eyes went round. High and tight haircut, pristine white armor, severe expression, dangerous look in his eyes. The man from his meditation. Slick. Kaz took off running. Hey, you. Stop. Kaz raced after Slick like the hounds of hell were on his heels, careening around a corner and barely keeping sight of the older trooper's white armor. Suddenly, Slick jumped, reaching for an uncovered ventilation shaft in the ceiling. Time seemed to slow and drag past Kaz's eyes like molasses. The Force screamed in his ears, and he reached out, clenching his fingers and yanking, pulling Slick out of the air and slamming him down with a crash onto the unforgiving Durasteel floor. Not waiting for the other man to stand, Kaz rushed forward, air whipping past his face, and slammed into Slick's abdomen, knocking them both to the ground in a sprawl of limbs. Swearing, kicking, scuffling, Kaz managed to crawl onto Slick's stomach, sitting over his diaphragm and landing a solid punch to the other trooper's jaw. Slick snarled and bucked, using his greater mass to throw Kaz off him, planting a foot on his chest and kicking out for good measure. Kaz hit the deck and scrambled up, dropping into ARC ready completely on instinct. Slick sneered at him and dropped into a stance of his own. Really, cadet? Slick glared at him, didn't wait for a response, and swung a punch straight at Kaz's head. Kaz blocked it, reading Slick's intentions in his body language and in the Force. Yeah, really, you're a damn traitor. Blocking two more rapid hits, Kaz lunged, striking the gap between the codpiece and Slick's upper thigh. Slick's leg dipped, nearly giving out from the hit, but he rallied quickly and kicked out hard, hitting Kaz in his unprotected middle and throwing him to the floor. Lunging forward, Slick dived at Kaz, intending to finish the job, and Kaz drew his pistol, firing a shot and missing Slick's head by a hair's breadth. Bad move, kid, Slick snarled, wrapping his hands around Kaz's own. Let go, Kaz growled back, pulse pounding in his ears and the Force shrieking around him in warning. Kaz wrestled Slick for control of his blaster. Slick yanked him up, only the tips of Kaz's toes touching the floor, and slammed the cadet into the wall. Kaz's head bounced painfully, and he saw stars burst in front of his eyes. His grip on the pistol went slack, and he felt Slick wrench it from his distracted fingers. Fear choked him, made him scramble back, fingers sliding against Slick's like water off glass in one last attempt to get his blaster back. Slick reared back, freeing the blaster from Kaz's control, hand wrapped around the barrel, and swung, pistol whipping Kaz with the grip right across his face. Yelping, Kaz dropped to the floor like a sack of bricks, hands pressed over his bleeding and likely broken nose. He looked up just in time to see Slick aim the blaster at his head. General Kenobi's prediction proved correct. Collectively, they'd gotten 3 hours of sleep before the proximity alarms had blared, and all hands were called to battle positions. Asajj Ventress did not waste her advantage in the slightest. The only thing that had saved them were the heavy cannons. The droids would have overwhelmed them with sheer numbers, and the only reason that did not happen was their position was well fortified and dug in. Obi-Wan knew such an advantage would not last, and that the only thing that would save them now were reinforcements, which they could not call for because the remnants of the blockade in orbit were still scrambling their transmissions. Admiral Yularen had left back to the nearest supply station to get fresh troops and provisions by mutual agreement, even though the move was risky and would likely lead to the Separatists fortifying their position in orbit during his absence. Unfortunately, when he departed, they were unable to send or receive any communications at all, and the only way they would know the Admiral had been successful was if fresh troops magically appeared. At the end of the first day, Kix had called from the infirmary to let them know that Slick had pulled through and was out of Bacta. So when the fighting hit a bit of a lull, Obi-Wan, Kaz, and Cody made their way back to the base to speak with him, leaving Anakin and Rex in charge until their return. When they arrived, they went straight to the med bay to speak with Kix, who was on rotation there for the day, Helix having been tasked with being on the front. Slick was sat up in bed, propped up with pillows, an IV in his arm and multiple sensors attached to him, transmitting to the monitors next to his bed. His eyes turned to them as they entered, and he gave them the most venomous look that Obi-Wan had ever received from a trooper to date, and that included the face Alpha 17 used to make at Anakin's battle plans. They arrived at the sergeant's bedside, Obi-Wan at the foot of the bed, Cody off to the right side, and Kaz standing over with Kix, trying to stay out of it entirely. "Ah, Sergeant Slick, good to see you're finally awake." Obi-Wan fired the first conversational salvo, his negotiator mask firmly in place. He slipped his hands into the sleeves of his outer robe and regarded Slick with a practiced, bland pleasantness. "Is it really Jedi?" Slick spat out, harsh expression on his face, his fists clenched in the hospital sheets over his lap. "Yes, of course. All life is valuable to me, Sergeant," Obi-Wan replied, completely unruffled in the face of Slick's anger. He'd expected it and was not surprised. Slick scoffed meanly. "Oh, is it?" He sneered. "Clones must not count to you then, when your kind use us as cannon fodder. What are we worth to you, Jedi?" The bland mask fell from Obi-Wan's face to be replaced by one cut from stone. "You are worth very much." His expression relaxed a little, turning vaguely contemplative. "But tell me, why did you allow Asajj Ventress to sway you to her cause? You yourself must not value your vote very much if you would willingly sacrifice their lives for your own personal gain." "I love my brothers," Slick snapped, lurching forward in the bed, face flushing a vibrant red. "I find that hard to believe when you betrayed them for money." Obi-Wan said coolly. "You put our lives at risk for some shiny coin?" Cody snarled from Obi-Wan's right. He stalked up to the bed, fire in his eyes as he glared at Slick. "That's what swayed you. Money. How dare you say you're one of us? You're Darmanda." "Yes, she offered me money, but she offered me something more important, something you wouldn't understand. Freedom." Slick's voice cracked on the last word, his face desperate, his force presence radiating the same. "Freedom?" Cody scoffed. He crossed his arms and rolled his eyes. Freedom from what? From the Jedi. From this war. From all of it. Slick was nearly foaming at the mouth, his hands moving rapidly in the air. They keep us enslaved. We exist to do their bidding. And when we do, we die. I was trying to stop that. You think you're so enlightened, don't you? Cody said meanly, fingers flexing around his upper arms. His pulse raced. He could feel the sweat dripping down his back, and his legs felt like something was buzzing in them. None of this showed outwardly in his face or posture. That you know everything there is to know about the galaxy, don't you, Slick? When Slick didn't respond, he continued, hands gesturing violently through the air. Well, answer me this. How does getting us all killed solve that problem? How does pistol whipping a cadet make you any better than the rest of them? You're so brainwashed you don't even know you're a slave. Slick railed back, not giving an inch. You just let the Jedi drag a cadet onto the battlefield and don't even question it. And you have the nerve to say I'm Darmanda. He's not just any cadet, Cody shouted back, hands swinging behind him to point at Kaz. It might interest you to know, Slick, that cadet is Force sensitive. The general saved him from being decommissioned and took him as his Padawan. Do you know what that means? That he will be a Jedi. One of us will be a Jedi, Slick, with all the rights and privileges that come with it. Cody stopped, jaw clenched, arms crossed again over his chest. Still think you backed the right side? Slick's expression faltered, and his gaze flickered over to the corner where Kaz and Kix were watching the proceedings attentively. He looked back at the commander, and his angry scowl was back as he doubled down. I was striking a blow for all clones. You were striking a blow for yourself, General Kenobi snapped, stopping Cody mid-breath. How could you do this to your Vode, Slick? How dare you come in here and speak our language to me, Eruiti? Slick fell back against his pillow, arms crossed, head turned to the side and eyes on the opposite wall. Leave me alone. I don't have anything more to say, especially to a Jedi and his pet meat droid. Cody reared back as if Slick had struck him, face slack, limp hands slipping from around his upper arms. He just stood there, staring blankly at Slick, uncomprehendingly. A hand closed around his elbow and Cody flinched, looking up into the wide, kind eyes of Obi-Wan. He had the fleeting thought that he'd never known what blue eyes were until he met the general, and that he quite liked the look of them, even though the general was wincing. That thought made him jolt when he realized his Force presence was lashing out, and General Kenobi was hurting from the strength of it. Cody reined himself in with difficulty and gave the general an apologetic look. He straightened, eyes hardening into a glare at Slick. Let's get out of here, sir. I'm done with this piece of trash. Quite right, Cody Obi-Wan said, once again serene as ever. They turned as one and walked out. Slick's angry scoff at Cody's words following behind them. Kaz scampered quickly after them, radiating worry into the Force. A prickling sensation ran up and down Cody's spine like it was counting his vertebrae. Goosebumps and pins and needles followed, and for the first time in a long time, Cody felt like he didn't fit inside his own skin. Everything was wrong, too tight or maybe oversized, he couldn't tell. His mind was aflame. The words Slick had said echoing around in it like screams in a cave. The general could clearly sense some of his internal turmoil, because he kept sending Cody worried looks as they made their way back to the loading zone and to one of the few operational gunships. Passing the dent in the wall again made Cody's shoulders climb up to his ears, bringing with it the sudden urge to find somewhere and just hide away forever. Abruptly, General Kenobi's fingers closed around his arm in a gap between his armor. Cody halted so fast he nearly tripped over his own feet. Sir? Obi-Wan just tugged him into the empty command center. Kaz slipped in just as the door was hissing closed and made himself scarce in the corner. He'd been given a direct order not to be out of sight of his master, but he didn't want to intrude on what was likely to be a private moment between General and Commander. Obi-Wan just guided Cody to the opposite side of the room, tucked away between a transparent steel screen and a terminal. "Cody, are you all right?" Obi-Wan asked gently. "Yes, sir. I'm fully operational." Cody answered brusquely. He winced internally at his choice of words. Obi-Wan frowned at him, lips pursed, brows drawn, concern shining from his lake blue eyes. "You aren't a droid, Cody. Don't talk about yourself like that." Cody flinched heavily, looking away to stare at a random spot on the floor like it owed him money. "Of course, sir." Cody heard a tired sigh come from his general, and Obi-Wan spoke again. "I know what happened last night has clearly shaken you, and what Slick said certainly did not help. Bottling it up will do no one any favors. We need to talk about this, Commander." Dread coiled in Cody's stomach like a sleepy snake. I don't know what happened last night, sir. I saw Kaz with a blaster to his head and I just reacted. I didn't even think. He was in danger, and I had to protect him." Kenobi's hand moved from his elbow to the space between his chest plate and his neck, thumb brushing soothingly across the muscles there. "But Cody, you can't use the Force in anger." "I know that," Cody burst out, looking back at Obi-Wan. His breathing started to pick up, his mind finally working through the implications of what he'd done. "I've heard you say it 1,000 times, but I didn't even..." It was like an instinct. Cody's voice cracked on the last word, and his face twisted in revulsion. "General, what does that say about me? Am I?" No, absolutely not." Obi-Wan's other hand snapped up, and suddenly both of them were framing Cody's face, fingers around the back of his head and thumbs on his cheekbones. "Cody, no, of course not. You aren't anything like Ventress or Dooku. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to imply that, or to scare you. I apologize." "Niseta, Cody." Cody swallowed convulsively, eyes flicking back and forth between Obi-Wan's. "Are you sure? You have to be sure. Because if I'm a danger to you, or stars forbid, to Kaz, or Rex, or the men, then I need to be dealt with, sir." "No, Force, Cody. You do not need to be dealt with." Obi-Wan tugged him forward sharply, pressing their foreheads together. Cody's brain shorted out, locked in a covenant with Obi-Wan. It was made worse by the fact he knew. The general knew exactly what it meant, and that Cody did too, and had done it anyway. Their faces were so close Cody could see the individual flecks of color in Obi-Wan's eyes. All his troubles from before fled his thoughts, and he simply existed, reaching out carefully down their bond in the Force, pulling it to himself and trying to wrap himself up in Obi-Wan's Force signature. The most incredible part was the general. Let him, helped even, wrapping himself around Cody as easy as breathing. "There you go, Cody. That's it." Obi-Wan murmured softly, "Breathe with me. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Nice and slow." Cody followed and felt his heart rate start to calm. His general spoke again. "Feel the ground beneath your feet, the armor on your shoulders, the smell of old blaster fire. Hear the quiet in the room." Cody's eyes slid closed of their own accord, and he felt himself be pulled into the Force by his general. Curiosity started to take over. and he watched as Obi-Wan pulled apart his own emotions, letting them out into the Force, and then pressing his Force presence against Cody's expectantly, waiting for him to do the same. Haltingly, Cody did, pulling at the rage, the anxiety, the hopelessness, the aching hollow knowledge that Slick was right, the thing that he did not want to face. He didn't want that to be true. He didn't.
Odysseus,
Cody, Obi-Wan whispered. His own pain at the thought made itself known. I know it hurts. I know it does. He let out a soft, hitching sigh. I won't let it stay that way, Cody. I swear to you. Hide, Ijaya. Hide. I will find a way to free you and all your Vode, like I did Kaz. You have my word. Cody nodded, head rubbing gently against Obi-Wan's at the motion, and opened his eyes. Slowly, his hands reached up and covered Obi-Wan's, carefully pulling them back and lifting his head away. He took in a fortifying breath. He felt better than he had in days. Months, even. I know, General. General, I know you will. Cody dropped Obi-Wan's hands and took a small step back, putting some distance between them. But you're just one man. I have yet to let that stop me. Obi-Wan replied, voice strong and steady. Cody huffed a quiet laugh. That's true. Obi-Wan smiled at him and stepped back, apology written in his eyes. I'm afraid we're needed back at the front, Commander. War waits for no man, sir. No, indeed. Obi-Wan turned on his heel and made for the door, spotting Kaz leaning against the wall, fiddling with the communicator in his vambrace. Come along, Padawan. We are needed elsewhere.
Yes, Master.
Kaz pushed off the wall and jogged over to them. He smiled at Cody. You feel better, Cody. I can tell. Yeah, I do feel better, kid. Cody shook his head and laughed. The blunt, easy way of a cadet, he thought fondly. With that, they left the command center and headed for the grueling battle that no doubt awaited them the next day. Everyone was battered, bruised, and sleep-deprived. The Separatists had not let up, pushing and pushing and pushing, gaining back the ground that they'd lost before the failed ambush attempt. The reinforcements that Asajj Ventress had brought were brutally effective. Soon, they wouldn't be able to counter the droid assaults. With the Admiral gone, they could not call for an airstrike, and were left with only the barest amount heavy machinery to keep the droids' numbers in check. At the moment, they'd been graced with a brief lull in the fighting. The droids' offensive this morning was easier to push back. Then the others. Obi-Wan knew it wasn't to last, but he still used this moment to take his Padawan aside and give the boy a quick once-over. The bruising around the cadet's eyes had faded to a dull yellow, and Helix had allowed the use of his goggles again, as well as the eating of solid foods. He was certainly dusty and scuffed up, like all of them, but he was still in good spirits. Kaz's skills with the blaster had shown marked improvement now that he could access the Force without drowning in it, and he'd become a useful member of Alpha Squad. He'd even taken to force-pushing droids and throwing bits of debris to crush them when needed. He was not at the level of a temple-trained Padawan quite yet, but due to the clone trooper's genetic modifications to learn and adapt with frightening speed, he was well on his way. I'm all right, Master, Kaz said with a lopsided smirk. You and Cody have been keeping me safe, and besides, I've been doing pretty good at that myself. Yes, you have. Obi-Wan acknowledged. I'm impressed with how far you've come in the last 2 weeks. Kaz's smirk grew a little. But you're still worried. If you ask Anakin, he will tell you that I have never stopped and will not. Obi-Wan chuckled ruefully. I am told it's the Master's prerogative to always worry for their apprentice, even when they are grown. So you're telling me I should get used to it? Kaz laughed, shaking his head. Got it, Master. I'll let you worry then. Why, thank you, Padawan. Obi-Wan rolled his eyes, but was still smiling anyway. His attention was taken by Anakin, who was walking up to them, Commander Cody and Captain Rex in tow. Anakin, everything in order? As it can be, Obi-Wan. Anakin answered, not happy with that, but not able to change it. I hope the Admiral gets back soon, or this is going to get real messy. I know. Obi-Wan's smile fell from his face and his shoulders slumped a little. We'll make it, General. Cody said, pulling his helmet off and sliding it under his arm with practiced ease. The Admiral will be back soon. We can last until he gets here. I'm thinking we don't have much choice. Rex said, hands resting on the tops of his blasters in their holsters. Certainly seems to be looking that way. Obi-Wan agreed grimly. He turned his attention to Cody. Anything to report, Commander? Helix and Kix have set up the field hospital in one of the most structurally sound buildings, sir. Cody answered, spine straight and voice strong. His Force presence was much calmer and less spiky after yesterday, even during times of high emotions. Other than that, we're taking advantage of the breather we've been given to recharge the guns in our cells as much as we can. Good work, Cody. Obi-Wan nodded. Suddenly his eyes went wide and he spun around, the Force zinging a warning up his neck, burning like a little star and hurtling through the air uncontested was a mortar shell. Obi-Wan's lightsaber was in his hands and lit before he even had the thought, and he launched himself into the air, bisecting the mortar round in half, and Force pushing the pieces far away to explode harmlessly against the side of an empty building. He landed in a crouch, lightsaber deactivating with its usual sucking hum, and he clicked it back to his belt on muscle memory alone. Whoa. Kaz breathed out, eyes wide. His jaw went slack, and he pointed to the sky. Master, I think there's more of them. Take cover! Cody shouted, jamming his bucket back onto his head and sprinting for the line of rubble they'd been using as a trench. Immediately, they scattered. Anakin and Obi-Wan leaned into the Force as one, shielding as many as they could from the blasts, then took off, sprinting back up towards the front they had left. Anakin. Cody and Rex pulled ahead of him, Obi-Wan slowing his pace slightly so Kaz could keep up. They all skidded to a stop, getting a good look at the marching phalanx of battle droids bearing down on them. Anakin whirled on Obi-Wan. They're back. I told you this victory was too easy. Obi-Wan said, lightsaber in hand, and gesturing at Anakin with 2 fingers, the others wrapped around the hilt. Maybe we shouldn't have sent the fleet back for supplies. Well, if you remember, I objected to that plan, Anakin replied, frustration bleeding into his tone, hands gesturing with his words. Too late to do anything about it now. Obi-Wan said with a shake of his head and a sigh. He turned to look over his shoulder at their troops sprinting up behind them. All right, men. Second wave incoming. Brace yourselves. Rex, you and your men follow me. Anakin ordered, running off without waiting for a response. Rex hot on his heels, shouting orders into his comm unit. Cody, battle positions. Obi-Wan ordered, taking off with his commander, Kaz running in their wake. Sir. Yes, sir. Cody started issuing his own orders, rallying Ghost Company and the rest of the 212th not already in position. Sliding into cover in a shower of dust, Cody, Obi-Wan, and Kaz took a quick moment to survey the battlefield before diving into the fray. Obi-Wan's lightsaber flared and swung in an electric blue dance. providing cover for Kaz and Cody to fight back against the droids. They made it to the front line. The ATRT Walker squad blazing past them in a hail of blaster fire. Heading straight for them were 3 Octuptara combat droids. That, Obi-Wan reflected, was certainly going to be a problem. He keyed up his comlink. Anakin, we need to take out those tri-droids. I'm on it, Master. Rex and I have a plan. Just keep pushing them back. We'll handle it. Make it quick, Obi-Wan said, closing communications and focusing back on the fight. Explosions erupted all around them. Men screamed, fought, some dropped dead from unlucky hits. Dirt, rocks, dust, bits of buildings and debris flew through the air around them. Obi-Wan's face was covered in soot, Kaz and Cody not faring any better, their once gleaming armor covered in scuffs. Puh! Take that, clanker. Kaz whooped in triumph, taking out 2 droids with as many well-placed shots. Eat blaster! Cody laughed. The sound a staticky buzz through his vocoder. You get 'em, kid. Kaz reached out his left arm, grunted, closed his fist, and then yanked, pulling 3 droids off their feet and into friendly fire, causing them to short out and collapse. Boo! Did you see that? Good job, Obi-Wan grunted out, lightsaber flashing and whipping, sending blaster bolts back at the enemy forces with pinpoint accuracy. A shine of movement caught his eye, and he looked over, spotting a lone B-2 attempting to flank their position. Padawan, 10 o'clock. On it. Kaz darted to Obi-Wan's left side, raised his blaster and dropped the sneaky droid. Tango down, Master. Good work. Skywalker should have attacked by now, Cody said, bracing up against the piece of rubble they were using for cover. The droids just kept marching, their pace not slowing at all. Don't worry, he has a plan, Obi-Wan said, feeling out with the Force. He paused and looked up, spotting the tiny specks of Anakin, Rex, and Torrent Company's own Alpha Squad. He pointed up. Look there, on the roof. I see them, General. About time,